Hey, you guys, it is time for another episode of the Wake Up Call in Children's Ministry podcast. You guys, I am so excited because we have two incredible guests today. We are talking about how can we empower our volunteers? How can we come up with effective strategies for, here goes, that word we all act like we love, but we really don't love, delegation. And team building, it is so important. Whatever ministry that you're in, it is just incredibly vital. And I can't imagine two more incredible voices speaking on this today. So get ready for just wisdom to be poured down on you. Today, I have my incredible friends, Catherine and Chris. Hey, you guys, for those who are listening to our podcast today, go ahead and let us know who you are, Chris, and then Catherine. Let us know a little bit about you and what you're into these days in ministry.
What's good, everybody? My name is Chris Cox. I am a next gen pastor here in Atlanta, Georgia, at Change Church. Been here since June of last year, and I've been in student ministry, youth ministry, now just in next gen in general, so working with kids and youth. But been doing all of that for about 16 years. One of the things I absolutely love to do is to have conversations with youth leaders. And so that led me to start a nonprofit called the Collective Youth Workers Group, where I bring youth workers together so that we could build relationships, share resources, and find rest. Sometimes just hanging out and getting to enjoy the company of each other. So I'm everything leadership conversations, and I'm excited to be on this podcast with the Esther Moreno to
Well,
have this conversation.
Kristen say 1 year we literally shut down the Orange Conference, like literally, like they turned off the lights and said, "Get out, the conference is over."
Yes, I had seen Esther online for all this time, and I was like, she's so amazing. And then we finally saw each other in person at the Orange Conference, and it was like we didn't want to go home.
Dude,
So.
I know, we just clicked immediately. I love it. I love it, Chris. Catherine, tell us who you are.
Oh, I wish I was there to hang out with you guys. We can totally have a great conversation. My name is Catherine Hwang-Jin. I have the privilege of living in sunny California near the beach, smelling the salt air. Love it. I'm at a church called Mariners, and I'm here as the pastor of kids ministry. Been doing this about 20 plus years, which is so crazy. But yeah, love it. We moved here with my family, and been here almost 2 years and been really loving it here in Southern California. We were in NorCal for a while. But yeah, I'm a California girl, and I get to do this and partner with volunteers and parents to disciple kids.
And Catherine is being totally humble. You guys, she is absolutely incredible and amazing. If you look her up, you will find out how incredibly amazing she is, that she is not sharing on this podcast. But you guys, we are going to jump right into these questions because delegating is so vital for the health of our ministry departments, regardless of what church size you are. And I'll tell you, even as I have traveled and I have met so many other ministry leaders and children's ministry leaders and youth leaders, it seems as if, even though we know it's so important, a lot of us get caught up in not doing it. So here's the question that I want to give you guys today. What specific challenges do you believe children's ministry leaders face when it comes to delegating tasks effectively within their departments? And even more important, how can we overcome those challenges? Catherine, I'll start with you and then I'll throw it off to Chris.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I wish I can say it's something that I still don't struggle with, but I do. It's hard because I think for children's leaders, if you're in it, hopefully you're doing this because you're absolutely passionate and you love it. And so I find one of the biggest reason people have a hard time delegating is because they love it, right? Every children's pastor or minister that I've met or volunteered to, it's like, you love teaching kids. You love being around kids. It's why God has called you to this position. And because you love kids, you almost feel like that, fills your soul. And so you don't want to give that to somebody else. I still do. One of my favorite things to do is baptism class. It's my absolute favorite. We invite the parents, and having the kids and parents, seeing them discipling each other and hearing about the parents' testimony, and then the kids sharing their testimony. Like, I get to witness Jesus literally
Wow.
in front
Yeah.
of me, him doing his thing. I don't want to give that to somebody, right? Like, I love it so much. And
Yeah.
so I think that's the positive side of
Yeah.
not wanting to delegate. And then the negative side would be like the perfectionists in all of us. If you're in kids
Yeah.
ministry and you're a teacher, or maybe just like if you're human, you think your way is the best way. My
Yeah.
12-year-old tells me her way is the best way, and it's the only
My
way.
12-year-old tells me that this is crazy.
That's why I don't do students. I'm just kidding. But yeah, the sinful side in all of us, we think our way is the only way. It's the way we
Yeah.
see things, and to look outside of ourselves and see that other people actually might have better ideas or better
Yeah.
tools and skills. That's hard to humble yourself to do that. Yeah.
I love it, Catherine, how you mentioned how this is something that you still struggle with sometimes. And I think when we look at those leaders who come from larger ministry contexts, and we look on social media and they have these incredible photographers and all of these great images. I think for us from a smaller church context who might be listening today, we assume that, they don't struggle at all with delegation. They don't struggle at all with volunteer recruitment and retainment. So I love just your vulnerability in speaking to all of us that it's something that we all struggle with. Chris, what do you think about what are some of those challenges and how can we overcome those?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Catherine, especially in her second point. Um, I know for me as a youth leader, as a children's ministry leader now, like leading a team, I really take a lot of intentionality towards developing myself and spending a lot of
Mm.
time thinking through plans, ideation, things like that. And so, like you said, sometimes you just think the thing that I spent this much time on because I have that time to be able to do it. Sometimes we also
Yeah.
just assume that our volunteers, because most of them are unpaid, they have lives
Yep.
going on. We
Yep.
assume they don't have the capacity to get it done the way that
Yeah.
we would get it done because this is what we're here to do. This,
Yeah.
this is what we've
Yeah.
been asked to do. We've been asked to lead this. So we kind of feel that burden of it being perfect is going to fall on us. So we might as well
Yeah.
just do it ourselves. But I think practically one of the ways that helps me, because I do have those moments, is that I remember that there was a man who came to earth who was literally God in the flesh. There was nothing he
Yeah.
couldn't
Yeah.
do. However, he decided to build
Yeah.
a team. And
Yeah.
so it's a decision we make because when I do that, I give other people a chance to unlock the purpose inside of them, to unlock the call inside of them, to be used to be a part of this greater story. And I think when that happens, something amazing happens because I tell people this all the time. And if you've heard me on the podcast before, you probably heard me say this. But one of the most amazing things that I've learned about Jesus as I look through scriptures is that he didn't even tell his own story.
Hmm.
Like, you realize that he didn't even write
Wow.
his own
Yeah.
story. His team did.
Yeah.
So he let people get in close enough proximity to him to where they got to work with him and they were so compelled and so inspired and so impacted by being able to work with him that they told the story for him. And that's how we get to
so
know
good.
about what he did. So there's something amazing that happens when you just let people in on the journey with you.
I love it. I love it. One of the reasons for me that I struggle with delegation immediately when I went into the ministry, I was super excited. And I remember having this meeting and we got all of the parents together and some of the children's ministry volunteers. And I wanted them to know, hey, we are all in this together. There was one parent who raised their hand and they said, hey, everything you're saying is fine. I mean, do whatever you want to do. I don't understand why we're here because isn't this your job? And I can remember how that distorted my leadership for several years thereafter. And I thought, this is my job. I can't delegate this to anyone. I have to give this to, I have to make sure that if there's any role that I'm giving it to me, that I'm making sure that I'm doing it and that I'm getting it done. So, Chris, I love how you mentioned Jesus. He is our example. He should be our example in anything, especially in delegating. And I think that is so important to remember that when we are keeping that, right, that God has sent us, He has assigned people to help us, that He has put callings on their lives to do amazing things. And when we don't delegate, we hinder them from walking in their callings. And how incredibly scary is that, to be in the way of someone else's calling? So I love it. I love it. I love it. Listen, you guys, we all hear this, right? Get to know your team. It's so important to build relationships. You got to get to know your team. It's like word vomit. We say it all the time, but I think for those of us in the trenches, if we are to be honest, we would admit that it can be harder than it sounds, with all the time constraints and all of the responsibilities that are constantly piling up on us. So I want to ask you guys to share in your experience some practical tips or strategies tailored for children's ministry leaders to identify and nurture their unique talents. So how can we identify those leaders in the midst of the time constraints and really nurture these talents that God is bringing to us in them when we're exhausted and we're all over the place? What have you guys done to really recognize those leaders? I'm gonna start with you, Chris.
Huh? Okay, well, one of the practical things that I try to do, especially in times when I am meeting with my leadership team, is
Mm-hmm.
I try to incorporate three elements into every meeting or gathering that I have with my team. And those three things are: number one, leadership care,
Mm,
leadership development, and then leadership directives. Sometimes, if all we do is come to a meeting with directives, telling them what we want them to do or what we want from them, then we miss out on the opportunity to get to know them more personally. But when we bring an element of leadership care, we create space to check in on our team, to see how everyone is doing,
mm,
celebrate birthdays, celebrate wins. Like, ask, are there some personal wins outside of the youth ministry, of youth or children's ministry, that we can celebrate with you? Because in them sharing that, we get to know some of their capabilities.
mm.
Oh, I didn't even know you were winning in this area, and we can incorporate
Wow.
this area into our programming here at the church. And then there's the leadership development. And when I say leadership development, I don't mean development just for the betterment of your program or what you're
Yeah,
doing at the church, but development for the betterment of that person.
I love it.
Different things
Yeah.
that you can strike a conversation about that just helps them be a better human being, not a better youth or children's ministry worker. And in that dialogue, you get to
Mm,
find some strengths, you get to find some things, you get to nurture some
mm,
things that will help even enhance your team. And then those directives, like being able to share, hey, this is what we're going to do this month. This is what we're looking forward to. And you may find out that when you share that and you just don't show up and do it and expect people to just jump on board, that people can speak into it and help enhance
mm.
it and help bring some more life into it. So those are just three practical tips that I bring into our meetings and gatherings that I think could help you focus on how you can delegate and engage your team a little bit better.
I love it. I love how you started with care,
Mhm.
leadership care, and I think that you use a key term that is so important: create space. As ministry leaders entrusted over volunteers and children and families, it is so important that we know that's a huge part of our job.
Yeah.
We may be under time constraints, but it is vital to create space to
Yes.
get to know those who are laboring alongside us. Catherine, what are some effective strategies for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Thanks for sharing, Chris. I love that.
Mhm.
So I think the biggest thing, something that we do here at Mariners is instead of like organizational structures, they call it care structures.
Mm,
Um, and some strategies that we've done is like Jesus had 12 disciples and like 11, disciples moved forward. And if
yeah,
Jesus spent that much time with these
yeah,
core 11, I think for us to think we could invest into 20, 40, 60, 70
hmm,
volunteers on our own,
yeah,
that is really hard to care. And so
yeah,
I think having a clear structure or clarity of like
hmm,
who's caring for who, is one
hmm,
person caring for 70 people? Well, that's probably about half not being seen,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so even showing, hey, if we have 100 kids in a room, if we don't have 10 leaders in there, that's some kids that's not going to be seen, that's not going to
Yeah.
be cared for, whose name's not going to be called out. So those are kind of strategies that we've used to help solidify what is the ratio in that room where a child could be truly cared for. What's the ratio of our care structures for even our volunteers, so that each volunteer can be called during a birthday. And then even like really having that structure so that we can see and pray, God, help us when there's holes.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really hard for just staff in general, because we think, oh, we have to take care of all these 70, 100, 300 volunteers on our own. And you can't. I always say Jesus can. He really can. He does all the time. But as humans who have, I love what you said, as human beings who have other stresses, other things, not just our tasks, like to really care and get to know someone, we need time.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, I want to take us back to this issue of delegating. In my book, Children's Ministry in Crisis, I pretty much dedicated a chapter to this because I think that it's so important, and there's so many reasons. I mean, I think that you guys stated some of the reasons of why we may struggle to delegate. You know, some of the ones I mentioned in the book had to do with identity. For some of us, we have literally found our identity in these positions, and we feel like if we give it to somebody else, we are giving them our no, this is my identity, go find your own. And we struggle to delegate, and maybe for some of us, like Catherine, what you said, we get super excited, right? We're like, yes, this is amazing, I love this baptism time. It's just, to be a part of this is so incredible, and without noticing it, we wake up and we're like these myopic worker bees, and we're filled with passion, but we're kind of keeping the work from others. And I think if some of us are honest who are listening today, for some of us, we just feel like we can do it better than anybody else can, right? Like, why am I going to give it to you? I know exactly how it's supposed to be. I might as well do it by myself. I'm going to confess, I have been there before. I struggle with that from time to time, and I have to discipline myself to give it away, to know that the church or the ministry is not going to burn down if you hand it off to somebody else and give them an opportunity and chance. So I want to ask you guys, because we're talking about delegation today, and we can't give it all away, right? We got hired for a reason, right? There are certain things that we are supposed to be doing in the ministry. So my question is, how can children's ministry leaders really strike a balance between delegating tasks to volunteers and still maintaining oversight to ensure alignment with the ministry's goals and values? So what feedback do you guys have on that? Catherine, I'm gonna start with you and then head over to Chris.
Yeah, I love that question. What can we do to align to the organizational's values, and then what can we delegate? So every human being is so beautifully created, and different positions exist. And so I think for me, really knowing what brings you joy and fire, and how God has created you. I know Patrick Lencioni did that whole like widget, just the evaluation. There's so many evaluations out there, right? The Enneagrams, the personality test, strength finder. There's all those things in spiritual gift tests. When you take that and you see how God has formed you, those are the things that I would say, okay, that's probably why the organization hired you. So for me, I love strategies. Like, I will think about 6 scenarios and come up with 17 solutions and be like, what is the best way? And I'll like think about it again and see how we can make it bigger. And that's kind of what I know is really needed and in that season. And so then I love documenting all these things and writing strategic plan. And so I know that's my gifting. And so then I'm very clear on, at least, okay, that's something I am able to do. But at the same time, I think what's really clear for those, especially as pastors, is our job to equip the church and the saints. And so how do I help someone get to the things that I'm thinking about? How do we help them think through those things? And then the biggest thing I would say is empowering is the hardest thing when you're delegating. So empowering them to not do it your way, but empowering them to think the way you're thinking. So we call it like a thinking framework. How do I help others think the way I think. That's something that we're really training more than the job, right? More than the task is like, look how I'm thinking. And then in your own personality, in your way, how would you think that and then execute?
I love it. I love
And it
it.
would be
Chris,
better than mine.
it's funny how God sends us people. You know, he always sends me people who are better than me, and I'm just super excited. I'm like, yes.
Hallelujah.
Chris, how do you strike that balance?
Yeah, I think for me, it's along the lines of what Catherine was saying, knowing what your strengths are and being honest about where you really could use help in allowing people to come into those areas, but still doing your due diligence to know and to think through things and to even in the times where you're delegating something that you may have already thought through, giving other people the opportunity through questions to speak into it, and being intentional about that. I think there's a famous story in the Bible of delegation as relates to Jesus, where he's about to feed a multitude of people. And in John chapter 6, it says that he lifts up his eyes. He sees this great multitude of people coming towards him. And the first thing he does is looks to one of his teammates. He looks to Philip. He says, "Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?" But then verse 6 says, but this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. So Jesus already knew how he was going to solve the problem, but he put the question to someone who was walking with him to see how he would think about it and to see if he would have an answer. And so when you do that, you empower your team, you share the win with your team. It's because it's like you already knew what you were going to do. And if they give an answer that's kind of like off, to guide them back a little bit to that answer that you already had in your mind. But because they got a chance to speak into it, it's now a part of their win as well. And when they feel like you're winning with you, then they'll continue to want to be a part of your team and be an important part of your team. So
I love that, right?
Their strategy is better than yours, and you're like, you're right.
Yep. He was like, I knew what I was going to do, but now I think we're going to change that and do what you said.
I love it. And that's okay. And I love how you guys are mentioning being honest with yourselves. Yeah. Being honest about, your strengths and your weaknesses. I think for a lot of us, we don't want to like kind of lift up the lid on all of the weaknesses. We feel like we have to present this strong leadership thing about us when God is saying, look, I know your weaknesses. I'm sending people to help you with those. So I love it. I love it. I love it. I want to ask you guys, because I know, come on, we all know volunteer retention crisis is a real thing that's happening and affecting churches all across the globe and ministry areas. Our volunteers are not just volunteers. They are so much more than that. They are our family people. And we know that families are busier than they have ever been before. So a lot of our volunteers, even the ones who are serving, they're serving because, hey, this is church. I want to serve the Lord. It's important to serve, and they're serving, but they might be missing that passion element that we want them to have, and that ownership of the role that they're actually serving in. So I want to ask you guys about this fast-paced culture that we're living in and this demanding environment. So my question is, how can leaders like you guys and like those who are listening today really empower their volunteers to take ownership, not just to show up for the role, but to truly take ownership of their delegated responsibilities and thrive in the midst of the craziness and the busyness of life? How can we do that? Chris, I'm going to go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that question. One of the things we ask our volunteers is to make what's called calculated commitments. So we ask them before they commit to something to really think about it, like to calculate what it would take to get it done. And then, we follow up, we have conversations, we encourage, we empower, we resource, we do everything that we can to help you do it efficiently. But we also ask on the beginning that, hey, what we're asking you to do, we understand that, life be lifing.
Yeah,
We
life be
understand
lifing.
that it gets busy. We understand that you have other responsibilities, but we also ask, like, if you can, to the best of your ability, make a calculated commitment, and then let your yes be your yes. And then we'll stand with you and partner with you as much as we can to see it through.
That is so good.
Yeah, I'm taking that calculated commitment. I love that. We ask in our interview questions that I love is, what part of your faith do you think will grow from serving? Because it's not about the task. It's not about just doing like a job. It really is, man, when you are around children and you see them have that aha moment with God and you watch them pray and praise Jesus with like all of their heart, something in your heart
Yeah.
changes. And like how we depend on Jesus, how we seek prayer. And the other part too, when you see how hard it is to serve and you need Jesus to help you get there in the mornings on Sundays, your faith will grow, because it's not, I always say, like, do you think this will be easy? Because it's not going to be, right? Serving, there is also the spiritual realm out there that now that you're stepping into these things, that things will happen, and we want you to grow in your faith. And so I love the word calculated commitment, because then it really does say, hey, have you thought about what this will bring? And it's gonna be incredible for your discipleship, your faith growth, and your dependence on Jesus.
I love that. Catherine, how important, I love how you mentioned interview questions.
Yeah.
Explain to those who are listening kind of what that is and why it's so important, why you guys have interview questions. I know that there are some churches who do that, some churches who don't. Why are interview questions when it comes to people coming to serve? Because you want to serve, you can serve in the children's ministry. This is a lot of our mindsets, but we don't want this warm body in the slot mentality. So kind of go there, because I think that that's so important.
Yeah, I mean, in, like you talk about, in this busy schedule of the things that we're all a part of, it's easy to skip that part.
Yeah.
But man, it's so important, because who's discipling your children matter. Like, who is impacting your kids, the life that they live. If you're asking these kids to follow these leaders, so now we don't expect them to be perfect.
Yeah.
But we do expect that, hey, your lifestyle is what these children are absorbing and learning from. And so I think in those interview questions, you can help, ask, what is your testimony? Where are you at? And as you evaluate where they are in their faith journey, you can also guide them, depending on their strengths and their talent, what roles actually fit to. Because I think there's a misconception that there's only like one role in kids ministry, that like all you do is watch and teach kids. Like, there's actually 300 roles in children's ministry, and every single one of your giftings can be, there's a tech team, there's worship team, there's so many different things, like arts and craft team. Like, so depending on their giftings, you can really help guide them so that they're thriving in your team.
I love it. I love it. So we're not just delegating to anybody, right? It's important to still have standards when we're delegating and handing tasks off. I want to ask you guys about this. I've dedicated my life to this, so you knew I was going to go here with this, the big training question, right? As I train leaders, I think it is so important. Some people who may be listening, maybe I've ran into a lot of ministries where they don't train their people. They're very satisfied with the status quo, and when it comes to support, if you sign up for this position that you kind of knew, and this is kind of the culture of our church, I want to go here because I want to ask you guys to just pour your wisdom and your advice. What role does training and ongoing support, Chris, I know you mentioned how you guys try to support and come alongside those after they make that calculated commitment. What role does that play in actually empowering your volunteers within the children's ministry team? And how can leaders ensure that these resources are readily available and effective? Chris, I'm going to have you go there, because you kind of mentioned, I love that calculated commitment and just that commitment from you to come alongside them, and not just you, but your team to come alongside them to help provide those resources. First, how important is it? How important is it to you?
Yeah, it's super important. And honestly, the way I kind of look at this is it starts with me. It starts with my desire to want to see my team be the best version of themselves that they can be. And it starts with me taking personal responsibility for things that are untrained before I try to hold them responsible. One of my sayings is that I never want to hold anyone accountable to a standard that I haven't communicated or helped train you to meet. And
That's
so
good.
when I start to see certain things or areas that need training within our kids ministry, before I try to come down hard on my team or try to, be really stern about correcting that
Yeah.
issue, I have to stop and say, Chris, did you do your due diligence at resourcing this area, at training, at making them aware of what the expectation is,
That's so
and
good.
things like that. And so the ways that I'm able to do that is, as I said earlier, I'm very, very, it was an ongoing church joke at my last church. They say, you're the most developed person we've ever had on our staff, because I go to development opportunities every year. I'm at 2 or 3
Yep, you
conferences,
do.
and really, honestly, outside of those conferences, or some of the best things that I get as a result of being in some of those environments, are the relationships that I've built that have been so impactful to me. And so you have to leverage those relationships of people who have made impact in your life that you know would be good for your team. And don't be so insecure that you don't want to share a voice with your team. And so I've done that. I've done that with Esther. I brought her to Virginia when I was serving there. And
You did.
I said, hey, just come train the team. And she comes in there and she's saying some of the stuff that I've already told them, and they acting like they heard it for the first time. And I'm like, sometimes your team needs to hear
He
another
only
voice.
flipped over one table, y'all. That's it. Just one.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, sometimes they just need to hear it from someone else, a fresh
Yeah.
voice, someone who they don't know as personably as you. And so because they don't know, but because you've endorsed that person, they respect them. So they're like, oh, this must be a professional if we're going to fly her in here to let her talk to us, or if we're creating space for this voice to be here. And then that new, fresh voice being able to speak and reiterate some things or to give some training, I think is a great tool for us to leverage as leaders.
I love it.
So good.
Catherine.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this misconception that like training happens in some classroom setting, or training happens once a year in a conference or some training expo. Training happens every single day, every moment you have with a leader. It could be in every email, every text message, every video you send, and like also how you present yourself and how you do the job, right? They're watching. And so I think if you're like, oh, no one's trained me because I didn't get some class, I think that's something, I mean, it could be true or not, but I think for leaders, we have every opportunity to train one person at a time. A lot of times they're like waiting for this giant expo with all your hundreds of volunteers to come. I think what I've learned in ministry is like, I have to train the same thing over and over again until like you become the most annoying drum. Like, did you take the sticker off the children? Like, so annoying to the fact I hope our volunteers are rolling their eyes when they hear the same training. Another thing I learned is no one, at least, I mean, if you're in this job, you're really passionate about it. So a lot of times volunteers, they're learning that passion, right? They're now joining your team to catch that passion. And so if they're not there yet, they're not thinking through all these scenarios and all these issues with you. And so inviting new people. So we do training every weekend. We do classes for new volunteers every weekend. We have training sessions and different levels of training as well. So if you're a senior coach, you get a different kind of training. If you're a coach, you get this kind of training.
I love that.
And then depending on the roles, like a tech team training, worship team training. And so, having specialized training and other voices of people that they respect. I love that you said that, Chris, because it's so true.
Yeah, one of the things my pastor says is that if you're going to be a leader, you have to be willing to be a chief reminding officer.
Yes.
Yes.
So if you're not willing to repeat yourself and repeat yourself and repeat yourself, then you don't really want to be a leader. But it takes that, and that's why I love how you posed the question about that ongoing support, that role, that the training and ongoing support. and how you don't have to wait until it's in the classroom. Sometimes it's just we pull you to the side and remind you of what we said last week.
Yep.
And that's an opportunity for training. So that's so good.
I love it. I love it. I want to shift our conversation to community and belonging, because I think that is so incredibly important. I mean, we all want community. In fact, I actually watched this documentary. I remember it was really spotlighting KKK, and I was so interested in this documentary, and I just wanted to learn, like, what is the mindset of someone who is a part of this hate group. And after my husband and I watched it, we thought that we would be just so angry and just so upset after we saw it. And we realized, if you really dig deep into it, some of these people who are joining this organization, they feel like they have no one. And this organization gives them a community and a sense of belonging. Um, so much so where they're willing to attach themselves to a hate group. So it just kind of shows the power of belonging and community. And I think that it is so important in children's ministry. So I wanted to ask you guys, how can we foster a sense of community and belonging amongst our volunteers in children's ministry? And how can we kind of facilitate really those opportunities for people to connect, for people to build community and strengthen relationships and collaboration? Because I know for me, it is a blast when I am with my friends, serving together in community in children's ministry. I'm actually still bitter because my friends signed up and they still won't put us together. And I think that they know that we just go cause all types of trouble the whole time. But we have a community there. So how can we foster that? Catherine, I'm gonna let you kind of take a jab at that, and then Chris, I'm gonna head over to you. Yeah, how can we do that? Make people really feel like they belong.
Oh man, I can cry talking about this, I think, because the church, truly to this day, the bride of Christ, is one of the most beautiful things that have existed. Like imperfect humans coming together midst of
Yeah.
conflict, differences, and saying, hey, I'm gonna still work on this thing and love you. Like,
Mm,
and I'm just
yeah.
gonna love you for just who you are because you're created in the image of God versus
Mm,
anything else that the world says. Like, they love you just because you were created. Like,
mm,
you haven't done anything in life, no achievements, nothing. But just because you're created
yeah.
by God and his image, like you matter, that
Yeah.
belonging is like mind boggling. And for us to be able to reflect that to each other,
Yeah.
like every weekend, like, I mean, I grew up in the church and I think I went to church 4 times a week. And it's because of that belonging, like when I couldn't
Mm,
speak English or when I had no idea who I was and trying to figure all that out, having safe leaders to tell me, like, hey, that's probably not a good idea. Like
yeah.
having that community meant so much to me. So, how do we create that? I mean, time, like time and
Mm,
opportunities. Um, for us, like even for kids to have the opportunity to serve together, it's really cute that like a lot of our we call them our junior leaders and our fourth and fifth graders, like not even having friends before coming to church, they start serving together on the tech booth and they're all
wow.
sitting there like, sharing snacks together. And now they have something to talk about. And so the opportunity and the time available, I think, to be somewhere together in that time, um,
Mm.
I think it's huge.
I love that, Catherine. Don't overthink it. Create those opportunities can happen naturally as
Yeah.
well. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, so much about leadership is about discipleship. And I love talking discipleship. I love talking discipleship strategies with leaders. And one of the strategies that I lead with as it relates to discipleship and just leadership in general when you're working with people is, um, like I said, I go back, I use Jesus as my example. I use
Mm,
how he brought his team together. And I want to read a little bit of Mark chapter 3, verse 13 through 15. It says, he went up on the mountain and he called to him those he himself wanted, and they
Mhm.
came to him. And then he appointed 12 that they might be with him
mm,
and that he might send them out to preach, to have power, to heal sickness, and to cast out demons. So
mm,
just in the way that scripture was written, it's like the priority of this call was
Wow.
not to go out to preach, to be busy, to complete a task. It was to be with him. So when he called them, he called those, number one, that he wanted. Like I said, it starts with us as a leader. Like, do you even want to be around the people that you serve? Because if you don't want to, you won't call them. Right? There's another part where Jesus is getting disciples, and it said he wanted to go to this place, and then he found Philip, or he found this person. So when you want to, you'll find them. And when you want to, you'll call them. And when someone feels found and someone feels called, they feel like they're part of something. Feel like they're a part of a community.
So
and another thing I talk about even in this, and I love the way you brought that word belonging, is because I feel like people need a space where they can belong before they believe, and where they can believe before they behave. And we've done the inverse so many times, where we look at how people behave, or how are they carrying out this task, and then we make assumptions about what they believe. Do they even believe they should be a part of this? And then we decide whether they should belong or not. But what if we reverse that and just say, hey, no, you belong here. And after we can convince them that they belong, we can help shape what they believe, and the fruit of what they believe about your ministry, about what they're called there to do, will show up in how they carry out their task, and how they behave, and who they become. So this is so important, so powerful as you deal with your team, that you kind of see that priority of presence. That's what I call it, the priority of presence. Just be with them for a little bit, and then it won't be so hard to send them out to complete tasks, because they'll be with you when they do that.
I love that. The priority of presence. It is so important. I am so enjoying this podcast. Like I have my pencil out. I should have a pen, but obviously I have kids. So there's pencils everywhere. And I am taking notes and learning as much as so many of you who are listening today. I wanted us to close out with something that I thought was so important, and it is the topic of appreciation, right? We all know, quote unquote, we are supposed to appreciate our volunteers, but really communicating authentic communication is really the heart of what I wanted to ask you guys today, because I think that it's so important, that it's not so surfacey. So my question to you is, how can children's ministry leaders effectively communicate appreciation and recognition for their volunteers' contributions, and really foster that culture of gratitude and true motivation within their team? Catherine, I'm going to head over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just got to talk to my team about this. It's so funny how a lot of times we think the appreciation is like a gift. So sorry about that, but a gift, or and that can be a form of love language, giving gifts, right? And for sure, we don't want to diminish that. But one of the most amazing things I found in appreciating someone is, like, back to what Chris and you guys talked about, is like who God has created you to be. And when someone sees them, like someone sees, oh, you saw that that's how I act around children. Oh, you saw that I really care about this person learning God's word. You saw that in me. When you point out that, hey, your unique gifting, I got to see it in action, and it being used by God. That's when, like, appreciation, that's, now you just spoke their heart language, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times, yes, I do love gifts. I mean, my husband knows one of my favorite love language is gifting. But probably as I get older, I'm learning, man, being known, knowing that, like, you're loved for just who you are and how you showed up, and you use your giftings in that scenario. When you point those things out, I think I really feel appreciated. And
I love it.
I see that more and more. That's what's helping others to feel belong to.
Catherine, I feel like we all need to just develop a role in kids ministry, and it's called "You Are the Spy." And we have just massive spies that are going around in the rooms and watching. Your entire role is to watch all of the amazing things that happen with our incredible volunteers, and then you are a spy, and then you tell me, and then I reach out to them. just so they see, because sometimes it can be so hard for us to be in there and to see, but to have leaders who are able to do that. Like you said, Catherine, there are about 300 different jobs that we could give out for children's ministry. Chris, share with us appreciation.
Yeah, I'm right along with what you guys are already saying. I think when a person feels seen, it just does something for them, especially when they're not expecting it. There are times when I'm in the meetings with our team and we've gone through different things. I lead with a team of other next gen pastors and a family pastor, and sometimes we'll be on a meeting. And once we've gotten through all the business, they'll be like, well, let's throw it over to Chris to see if he has anything. And all I want to do is tell somebody I saw him. I'm like, hey, well, let me use my time to say, like, I saw you greeting families this Sunday. And I just need you to know, like, it was amazing, right?
Yeah.
Because we are busy and we are doing it, and they know that. So for the fact that beyond all of that, you still see them and then you see it and it's important enough for you to say something about it. I've just seen the impact that that's had on the lives of some of our volunteers, and even when I have to have like hard conversations or we have to talk about areas of improvement, I always lead in with some things that I can appreciate, because you're definitely growing. We want you here. Or honestly, I'm like, if I didn't want you here, I probably wouldn't take this time to correct it. I'll just be like, hey, maybe we should serve somewhere else. So there's always a reason why I want you here. And sometimes you got to lead with that so that they know that they're appreciated and they're a valuable part of the team. So I'm in
I
agreement
love
with
that
you
you
guys.
said that. No, I love that you pointed out even the hard conversation, even, hey, like the fact I'm even having this conversation for areas to improve shows that I care, shows that I see a potential. I know it's hard. A lot of people, especially right now, are scared to have hard conversation. And so I love that you're leaning into that, Chris.
I love that. You guys, it is all about empowering our volunteers and coming up with effective delegation strategies and team building. Chris and Catherine, thank you so much for joining us and hanging out with us. I also want to point out that Children's Ministry in Crisis has a workbook out now that I'm super excited about. We have poured so much into that. Chris, Catherine, what you mentioned, we have built out so many assignments and activities and worksheets for leaders. That's right. We are giving you homework that's right there in the midst of tough, challenging questions are really meant to challenge you and help you to understand your ministry in your particular church context. I want you guys to know that that is officially available on esthermoreno.com. Chris, Catherine, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to join us for the next episode of the Children's Ministry Wake Up podcast in Children's Ministry. We will see you next time.